I've lived in both Bali and Koh Phangan as a 9-year digital nomad, and here's my comparison of the two. They're both really beautiful islands, so you're not going to go wrong with either. But first up, we have networking and co-working spaces. Bali, more specifically Canggu, wins hands down. The amount of co-working spaces in Bali and specifically Canggu is just enormous, and honestly, it's probably the best thing that's going for Bali at the moment. Nowhere really compares to Canggu's networking. Bali wins in that regard, hands down. Koh Phangan does have some co-working spaces and you can work from a lot of cafes, but it's not nearly as extensive, and some cafes have rules about what hours you're allowed to work on a laptop and how long you can stay there. At number 2, we have infrastructure. I would say Koh Phangan wins on infrastructure, but it's more tricky because Koh Phangan is a lot more remote. It doesn't have an airport, it doesn't have a mall, but the water is a lot more safe. I don't know if safe is the right word, but it is a lot less risky than Bali's water. I've been to both a handful of times, and every single time I've been to Bali, I've always gotten Bali belly. Compared to Thailand, I've never really had any food or water-related sicknesses, thankfully. Both places have pretty good roads. Bali does have more traffic, but it is a larger and more populated island. I do like the roads in Bali more though. They aren't as wide, which makes them safer because you have to pay attention and you can't drive as fast. However, Koh Phangan does have fairly small roads compared to other places in Thailand. Like, for example, Phuket has very wide, like 4, even 6-lane roads, I think. And when you're riding a moped on those, it just doesn't really feel that safe. As for internet, both places have really good internet. It really depends on where you go on the island, but you shouldn't have a problem. Next up, we have cost of living. Bali wins here, but of course it depends on where you stay. The further you stay away from Canggu, Uluwatu, Ubud, those types of areas, the less expensive things are going to be. Whereas in Koh Phangan, it's a much smaller island and it's less populated, so it's harder to find less expensive areas to live. It's kind of the same price everywhere. As long as you're not on the beach, the prices don't vary too much. Next comparison is visa requirements. Of course, it depends on what country you come from, but in general, Thailand easily wins here. Thailand just has so many different kind of visa types that range from several months to even several decades. Indonesia does have some visa options, but they aren't nearly as expensive. So most people just end up staying the 30 or 60 days and then doing a visa run at the end of that. From a safety perspective, I felt safer in Koh Phangan, but both places are relatively safe. Honestly, the most dangerous thing in both places are tourists on the road and mosquitoes. But if I had to choose from a safety perspective, I would choose Koh Phangan over Bali, just because it's more remote and not as populated. So there are fewer scams and crazy drunk tourists, those types of things. For nature, both places are absolutely beautiful and have amazing nature. There's probably more nature in Bali, but that's just because it's bigger. However, it's not as accessible. For example, Bali has volcanoes you can go see, but depending on where you're staying, it's going to take at least an hour or two to drive to them. Compare that to Koh Phangan and you can get to pretty much anywhere on the island in less than 45 minutes. Pretty much no matter where you stay in Koh Phangan, you're going to be close to nature. But in Bali, it's going to be a bit more of a drive. To balance that out though, Bali does have more nature and outdoor activities to do, which leads me to activities. Bali wins with more activities. Like I said, it's just bigger and has more activities. However, both places have waterfalls, treks, beautiful beaches, snorkeling, scuba diving, jet skiing, beach clubs, etc. The beaches on both islands are super beautiful. However, it depends on where you go. Most of Bali's beaches are not as nice as you would expect, but in Uluwatu, the south part of Bali, you have some world-class beaches that are really great. They're just only in that part of the island, pretty much. Koh Phangan has very good beaches. Most of the island has access to them, but they don't have any surfing. As far as coral goes, both places have pretty nice coral reefs. Bali will win in that though. Maybe not in Bali, but right next door is an island called Nusa Penida, and it has some really great world-class scuba diving and snorkeling there. Bali is definitely more accessible since it has its own airport. I'd say that's one of the downsides of Koh Phangan is it's sort of hard to get to. If you fly into Koh Samui like most people do, you're going to end up paying a lot more because the island's airport has a monopoly on the airlines that fly in and out of it. It's much more expensive to fly into Koh Samui. A cheaper alternative is to fly into Surat's airport. It's on the mainland, but then you have to take a bus and a ferry for several hours to get there. Last but not least, we have health and wellness. Bali is basically the mecca of health and wellness, especially among nomads. The gyms, the yoga, the spas, the restaurants, the groceries are all world class. It's great. It's one of my favorite things about Bali. Especially places like Nirvana that have a health food restaurant inside of the gym with like 5 different saunas and cold plunges and ice baths. It's great. That being said, Koh Phangan does have a health and wellness community and facilities, especially in the north part of the island, although they aren't nearly as extensive as what Bali has. The air quality, though, in Koh Phangan is better, which is noteworthy. So in my opinion, if you're a new digital nomad who's been to neither, I would probably still go to Canggu just because there's just more of everything there and you're more likely to see other people who are doing similar things that you are. However, if you want a place that's a bit more under the radar, I'd go to Koh Phangan. It's slowly becoming a Bali alternative for nomads. So what do you guys think? Do you agree with my assessments? Are there other places that you know about that are similar to Koh Phangan and Bali? That's something that I've had an issue with over the last several years, is just trying to find a competitor to Bali. And from what I've seen, Koh Phangan is basically as close as you get. But if there are any other places, let me know in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to follow me. I'm on my 9th year of digital nomading while I buy and build businesses that fund my lifestyle.